Sure.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our session. My name is Mundher Al-Shabi. I'm a senior data scientist at In26 Bank. Before that, I was doing my PhD in deep learning, applying deep learning in medical imaging. And I co-founded startups, worked on video analytics and applying deep learning, such as convolutional neural network, etc. I will be moderator for this session, and will join me Sharianta, and Florin. Could please introduce yourself?
Sure. Shreyanta, I'm a director of data science at Novartis, been there for 4.5 years, got a PhD in machine learning and computational biology, worked in pharma, worked in e-commerce, came back to pharma, and I had an AI innovation lab at Novartis called Graphs and Molecules, and I work with graphs and anything to do with predictive modeling when it comes to research and discovery.
Okay, my name is, I'm very loud. My name is Florin Coman. I'm currently working at Bosch. Actually, tomorrow we will do the presentation. So we will be tomorrow first with showing you a live demo. We will kind of risk it. I saw that most of the presenter did PowerPoints and so on. We will we will have another approach. In this panel I will try to speak less from the Bosch perspective, because if I'm talking from the Bosch perspective, it will be impossible for me to cover this big company. But I will share my thoughts as a former researcher, and not representing Bosch today, but tomorrow in the morning.
Thank you. So maybe we should start with light questions, and then we can open it for Q&A from the audience. So maybe the main topic for today is the deep learning trends. So the main question would be here, what is the main trends you see that increasing popularity nowadays?
Actually, Yulia covered quite a few of them in the last talk, and active learning is one, right? Semi-supervised learning is another. There's a dearth of labeled data. That is the two of them I see coming up more and more. From a technology perspective, there's geometric deep learning has been coming up of late. It's been picking up, though is it scalable or not, that's still to be seen. And the last one I think that's coming up really fast is some kind of federated learning, especially with privacy and security issues coming in, especially in pharma where I work. Privacy and security is a big concern, so federated learning is something that we'll certainly look into.
And I understand you work also on medical field, pharma. Is there are they catching up with the deep learning? How far they are from the new trends coming from the academia?
Pharma is it's a large world, right? I mean, I did my PhD in protein structure prediction, for example, right? And my journey into data science or artificial intelligence, I always used to use neural networks. And back in 2007, I've used neural networks. It just was not called data science and AI at that time, right? Of course, deep learning came up with GPUs and all that stuff. So there are two parts to pharma. So in the research side, bioinformatics, cheminformatics, which are kind of child of AIs anyways, has been there for some time, and it's certainly there, up there. On the other hand, if you look at commercial manufacturing, where the data is not as deep, yes, there are some ways for pharma to catch up.
Okay, awesome. Florin, you work on conversation AI. What's the main trends in deep learning there?
Yeah, I will be very direct. I think deep learning is challenging in conversational AI. Now, conversational AI means two things. NLU, natural language understanding. You need to understand what the user is saying. Then you will have dialogue policy learning. And then you will have NLG. Let's take them one by one. let's take them into NLG, natural language generation. You will use in the real life deep learning. If I may answer this, I will say no. And I will tell you why. Now, in Bosch, when you answer a customer, you cannot risk it to give a customer from modeling and something like that. You need to do a very static fulfillment in order for you to be sure that you answer the customer as you representing a company. So from my perspective, using deep learning in NLG, especially in production, is very risky, and I will not do it. You will be doing it in, we want to do a social bot, and to be more interactive, let's show how the bot can answer a user. Prior to working in Bosch, I tried also writing. I wrote some books and I did some screenplays. And what I can tell you for sure, that when you have a client as a people, as the one that is on the other hand of your NLG, the expectation is very high. Everybody now is doing conversation. When you see in Berlin and in London and so on, they are going to the coffee, and everything that a human is doing every day is improving the skills in conversation. You want a bot to be in line with this and keep in line with what the human are doing? I don't think so. It is possible. One thing that you will not have the database. Nobody will share. Facebook will not share all the messages from Facebook in order to train something. And on the other hand, when you will do the training, maybe the trends in conversation, in real life conversation, will change. So I don't believe that using deep learning in NLG it's a good idea. Maybe like Amazon Alexa is doing some NLG, but probably it's not NLG. It's kind of reading something from a text in order to better synthesize an answer. So it's not quite an NLG. So from my perspective, using, to summarize this, using deep learning in NLG is not a good approach. Now, using deep learning in dialogue policy learning, I don't think it's either a good idea. That means that RASA tried to do it, this kind of end-to-end conversation, and train end-to-end conversation, and you have two limitations. One, you will not be able to have data sets, or if you are able to have data sets, you need to pay a lot of money for this. And second, if you are looking in real life, how the human is interacting, in terms of dialogue policy learning, you have policies, you have like states. In order for two people to understand each other, we have some rules. So interaction between two persons doesn't mean any neural approach to the interaction in terms of policy learning, but means some rules that those two people need to oblige, it is called etiquette, in order for them to understand. So also in dialogue policy learning, if you ask me, deep learning has nothing to do with it. Now the third most important layer is natural language understanding. In here, I believe that deep learning it's important. And I will say something related to what I did previously. I wrote a book like 10 years ago. It was very well received. And somebody came to me and said, let's do a play, a theater play after this book. You know how you are familiar with the process of doing a dramatization of the book in order for this book to be put into theater? Does anybody know this? You are doing two things. One is very similar with what every NLU model are doing, is doing some summarization based on intents and based on entities. So half of the issue is kind of solved with all the current NLU models that are trained now with BERT and so on. But what strikes me, and I'm not seeing it now, is that when you are doing in real life, besides getting some intents and some entities from a text, in order to understand the text, you need to do something else. I don't know if you know the answer to this. I know it because I did this process of dramatization and I know it very well. In theater, this process is called, I think I know the word in Romanian, but I don't know in English, is something like, I don't know, I will tell you what it does. I need to inform the actor in the screenplay some details, very important details, related with environment, related with dressing of the actor, and related with some state of mind of the customer. If I'm showing an actor only the intent and only the entities, he will not be able to play that theater. He will not be able, because he will not understand from that what he needs to play there. I need to give him something more. I need to give him this kind of summarization of other states that are going through in order for the other person, that is the client, to understand what is going on. And I will close the parenthesis. I think that in deep learning, we are focusing too much in training data and in getting these entities and intents, but we are not closing all the picture, because the customer or the other person will not understand the NLU without this additional stuff that in real life we are kind of using.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shreyant, I want to go back to that discussion about trends in research. Okay, so I mean, there is something unique about deep learning, which is the space or the differences in trends between academia and industry is very small compared to any other fields. So when there is a new paper, a new method released in any research venue or any conference, like after like few months, you start seeing it in industry, right? So do you see this differences or this gap between industry and the research will be the same? Is it going to go narrow, or is it going to be wide than next year?
I mean, especially with deep learning, given the amount of data that you have to train a really nice model and the amount of money required to train such model in terms of computing infrastructure and database, I think that's why the industry is right up there, right, compared to any other field. I mean, most of the top publications in deep learning, of course it comes out from academia as well, but Amazon, Google, and Microsoft Research, and all these are right up there with it, right? And we in turn collaborate. In the same way, if you look at, again, pharma space, right? If you look at the difference between what a Harvard publishes versus a Novartis publishes in Nature or a Science, when it comes to deep learning and stuff like that, you'll find the difference is minimal. Of course, again, there are particular areas where the difference is narrower. There are other fields where the difference is much broader. For example, I'll take the example of reinforcement learning. Right? Reinforcement learning, most of the things that come out, can it be used in the industry in many different places? Yes, but does it actually get used a lot in the industry? It's still mostly, multi-arm bandits without the deep learning part of it. Right? You use Q-learning, but I don't know how much deep learning-based Q-learning do you do. And to his point, right, in those kind of scenarios, it is more about how correct it is. I mean, that 98% is problematic because the 2% makes a difference, right? Does humans not make 2% mistakes? Yes, they do, but it's more forgivable, I guess. For example, let's say trials, right? We do a lot with, he was talking about synthesis, right? In rare diseases, when we do not have a lot of patients, we still need to run our trials, and we need to run our trials, and let's say somebody is suffering from ALS or something, and we have a drug which we think is useful. We cannot have a control arm because it's just ethically not correct that we do not give that other person a chance to improve. So how do we create a control? So we often synthesize data. And we create synthetic control arms, right? But again, to his point, right? Synthetic control arms, when a deep learning model creates it, let's say I use a GAN or something to create it, FDA looks at it and is like, I don't understand anything of this, let's just go back. However, in the pure research field, there's a lot of synthetic data getting generated because there's no regulatory approval required over there much. It's about publishing papers and giving it to the next scientists who understand it. So it depends on who the audience is for your work. That's where the difference between, is the customer involved? When the customer is involved, the data between academia and industry tends to be larger. When the customer is not a consumer, it tends to be smaller.
So one of the technologies that successfully managed to move from research to industry, one of them like transformer or language modeling. Also like convolutional network on application of computer vision, like object detection, classification, etc. Yeah, and like you also mentioned graph. So what do you think about graph? Is it will become like a thing? It will become a trend? Graph.
It should. If the engineering, there's a lot of engineering challenges to using graphs, right? Graph databases, for example, are they completely scalable today? Possibly not. There's a lot of gaps in the graph databases. And engineering remains a challenge, even with transformers, right? I mean, BERT does a great job with a lot of things, but how many BERT models actually go into production when you need an instantaneous inferencing and all that stuff? Not a lot. We again tend to make trade-offs. Okay, a little bit of accuracy can be traded off versus something else. And the amount of BERT that is used, for example, in research purposes versus actual production, there's a huge chasm to it, right? Graphs is the same thing. I guess the chasm is even bigger because engineering-wise, getting that graph to go in is difficult. On the other hand, when we have multimodal data, and insights can come from multimodal data, I think graphs are one of the best ways to do it. Because you cannot really you can't have 5 different models running at the same time and then some inferencing out. So you want to have a 360-degree picture with multimodal data. Yes, graphs are one of the best ways to go about it. So I think there's a lot of work going on, right? A lot of the larger tech companies are working on their own graph databases. There are other companies coming up with it, but scalable for Neo4j, everybody uses Neo4j, right? But you run a query that's more than 5 hops deep, it crashes. So once we get over the challenges, I guess we'll be closer to production and those things.
Florin, you mentioned multiple problems on applying deep learning and conversational AI. Do you think this is the problem will be temporary for now, or is it going to be solved in the next few years, or it's fundamental problems?
Yeah, I thought a lot of these questions. I'm a Romanian. Now I'm living in Berlin. And we did the school in that communist era, and in there some former it was Stalin, has some word for education. It was learn, learn, learn. And when we went to school, what we did, we learn, but not in terms of education, but in terms of knowledge. So every time the professor came to us and put more knowledge, and more knowledge. So the learning should be more deeper, deeper, and deeper. My question is, you know what happened with that system of thinking? It crashed. So in the end, if you put more learning and more learning without some kind of structural understanding of what that learning is supposed to do in the future, you have a lot of issue. For me, I think deep learning from the beginning should be, we should go to a marketing guy, and maybe we should transform it into a more like a deep education stuff, because what we are doing, we have BERT. From my perspective as a linguist, I will tell you that BERT, in terms of fundamental, is wrong. You will tell me, yes, the results are very good, but in terms of, if you ask a linguistic, is wrong. Because when you are saying a sentence, every time you are saying the words one by one in progression. BERT is doing like, okay, mask the middle question and do this bi-directional stuff, but it's not in real life. In real life, a person, when he's trying to say something, he doesn't know the end of the question, and he doesn't start with the end of the question. He's starting with the beginning and the question, and then progress it to the end of the question. BERT in terms of linguistic is wrong. Now we have all kinds of data, and we're training, and like Stalin said, learn, and in the end, I don't see where we are getting at. Even if we are training all kinds of hyperparameters and we are doing all kinds of processing better the data and all kinds of fine-tuning and so on, I think we need the branding to deep learning, and should be transformed into a more deep education, more structural. It is a good thing that everybody can do it. You need to have a GPU or a TPU or something, and you can find it anywhere. You need to find the data as you can find it anywhere in the research and play with it. But in real life, putting a lot of knowledge in a person or in a bot will not help without having a more structural way of doing this, and this is called education. So for me, this needs to be a trend in future.
So, I mean, do you think the problem will be solved with the more data, with the scalable models, or, I mean, is the deep learning, the problem is fundamental with the deep learning or a particular model?
As I gave you that example with my process of transforming a book into a play, you need to add something to a deep learning model in order for this model to be sure that in real life it has some, not do it better, but doing something complementary in order to work together, and the NLU and probably in deep learning the graph and the image are getting more in terms of trends. I'm here for the conversational AI. I don't think I'm the right person, but yeah.
Shayant, one of the things that you mentioned about like cleaning data, do you think this problem can be solved easily, or it's?
No, not easily for sure. I mean, I remember, I think the tire example, I think Continental, right, gave the tire computer vision example. I mean, the reality is the quality of data tends to be poor in real life. You can't do help at this. And when you talk about data cleaned at at a level where deep learning can really go to work, I mean, not everything is Wikipedia, right, that you run through everything and learn everything and get on with it. In real life, when data is collected, it is not great. So, for example, again, in pharma, we have a lot of things about remote trials going on. Why do we need to go to the hospital to do trials? We can take pictures on our phones and just send it over, and we can do diagnostics on our phone. who's going to calibrate that phone? I mean, the resolution of my phone versus the resolution of somebody else's phone might be very different. Even if the same, exact same iPhone brand and model, it might be very, very different. And this consistency is not going to be achieved in real life. That's why it's called real life, I guess, right? And so it's a lot of work to clean that data. And AI can actually help a lot in actually cleaning the data. So we have something that's going on, we call it AI for data, and the whole idea is can we do better standardization using AI? So take the data, unclean data, and can I use models to clean that data up, for example? So those are things that I think AI and deep learning should focus on, because unless that problem is solved, we can train 175 billion parameter models in GPT-3, but that's not going to be real life ever.
So that, I mean, big companies like at the scale of Novartis, big data is not a problem, but maybe the labels of it.
This is the most untrue sentence. Let me clear this. Okay. In Bosch, I have 100 million recordings. Mm-hmm. I'm mainly in the voice part, and I cannot use any of it. Yeah. So a smaller company can do a better job in having data than big companies. So big companies are very much restricted and limited in order to have access to data and use that data. And it is also for processing the data. I talked with somebody from, I see it is not here, from a company, and he said that they have some breakthrough with their colleagues from data governance and so on. And if they are doing a lot of the identification and cleaning, they are able to use that data. Our data governance is saying no, even if we are using the identification. So even if I'm taking these recordings, and in transcription you will not see any entities and any customer data, our data governance will not say okay, because maybe in there are some things related to the customer, and the customer doesn't want us to know that information. So this actually is the biggest challenge for the biggest company, how to use their data, because in this moment I have some projects in US. In there things are more flexible. I can do a lot of stuff, and I can even do deep learning. In Europe,
oh yeah.
Yeah. I believe deep learning in Europe is somehow restricted.
Is it like a GDPR problems, like privacy, the regulations here in Europe?
Yeah, everybody is scared, so scared about GDPR that
nobody collects the data.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. I mean, we make a big deal of saying that we got so many petabytes of data. The reality is probably a few gigabytes is useful. The rest of it, I mean, there are 10 versions of the same data with different, even if it's tabular data, different column names. You cannot understand this is equal to that. And it's essentially useless. You cannot make it broad. So I keep saying this, and especially in big companies, we tend to have very broad data sets. So we have lots of data in terms of, some pieces of information on this and some pieces of information on that, et cetera, but none of them tend to be deep. It's not a lot of deep data, it's a lot of broad data. And deep learning, to his point, education versus this thing, deep learning tends to work on deep data, not on broad data, which is a challenge. So yes, big data is a problem for larger companies. So we are a 150-year-old company, and we supposedly have a lot of data, but the reality is we have very little useful data.
Okay, so one of the problems to access, to get advantage of this big data, you need resources, computation power. And this is open discussion about ML ops. Where do you see the ML ops? What's the new trend?
I mean, super useful thing, right? I mean, especially when you have a production system, and like Julia was saying, when we have an active learning system or whatever, when you have newer and newer data coming in, and we are supposed to retrain the model and then put it back in production. The reality is because our models have memorized more than generalized, which is the reality, the model performance tend to drift a lot in production. And unless we have good ops pipelines which are controlling that and detecting that, one fine day, I remember a few years back, Microsoft released a bot on Twitter, and people started just to get it screwed up, were passing abuses at him, and after a certain time, that bot started abusing everybody. Because there was a lot of, and that's exactly how it was trying to do. The same thing happens with the real-life models when we put it into production, right? Because the reality is we have memorized the data rather than generalized the data, generalized the learning, which is why it drifts a lot. And if it is drifting a lot, detecting it and making sure it is fixed or put in a different model which is a little bit more robust. And I would rather, especially in a production system, go with a more robust model than a more accurate model, because I know what I'm getting wrong, and rather than suddenly something going wrong.
So the term ML ops by itself is trendy. I mean, we start hearing about this maybe title the last few years. So what others other positions or other titles we start hearing in the next few years?
Okay. I don't know if you guys went to past year's summits, events. We were back then more optimistic. I see a trend, so I believe next year we will be all dressed up in black, and so I see a trend that this positive view on things are not getting into a good direction. But in the same time, we need to see that we are seeing a lot of progress in using ML and deep learning. So this is, without a question, a breakthrough. So now I'm a Romanian, that I'm working in Berlin. I do not know German at all. And I have my Google and Microsoft translation on my phone. And I can live in Berlin because of this solution. And in this moment, I believe we need to agree that in some area, and I believe also in graphs and also in image, we have a lot of progress in terms of deep learning. I'm more negativistic because I'm the guy in conversational AI. And in conversational AI, as I told you previously, we are talking with directly with a human. And every time this human has a lot of expectation, as you said, if one of our customer, and I've heard a lot of recordings, if one of our customer is calling an agent, do you think that our agents are very good in what they are doing? A human agent? They are terrible. So I listen to some recordings. It is like they are talking in different languages all the time. So they are spending sometimes 12 or 13 minutes to a call that should last like 2 minutes. When a bot is there on the line and trying to answer the question, if in 2% or 5% of the cases he's giving a bad answer, everybody from our commercial is saying, what the, I can say fucking here.
You already say it.
So I believe in terms of trends and risk, what we should do better. In Bosch, everybody is thinking that you guys are doing appliances and fridges, and actually only 50% of Bosch business is in appliances, 1.5. So we are not doing appliances. 60% of our business it's in automotive. So that means it means image, it means all kinds of stuff. It means imagine a driver that is is driving a car and he needs to get in touch with a call center in the driving mode. It means a lot of stuff, and we have a big issue because, in Bosch, my colleagues, the colleagues that are involved in that part of the business with how to drive, what is the word? Autonomous driving. Sorry, my English today is very bad. If our stakeholders believe that 1 in a million times the model is having an error, it will not trust the model. Even if we know that we have as human a lot of bad drivers and so on.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think I would like to open this for Q&A.